Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken.
Hey, Kiernan.
How are you?
Hey, how have you been?
I've been great. Thank you for asking.
So, I haven't seen you in so long. That's so good.
I'm especially good because we are tackling some presidential history today.
Yes.
You know, I couldn't be happier about that.
If you and I agree on one thing, it's presidential history should be forefront in this podcast.
Absolutely. So today we're talking about in Rapid City, South Dakota, there's an area called City of Presidents. And the City of Presidents is an area where on 44 street corners, there is one statue each of every president that has ever sat in the big decision-making chair.
Right.
I realize you can't say sat in the Oval Office because that didn't even start until Theodore Roosevelt.
Yeah,
all of those, unfortunately, all men up to this point, but all of those folks who have been president have an image there. And today we're going to be talking to the artist, James Van Nuys, who created the Barack Obama statue that has just joined all the other presidents.
Big number 44.
Absolutely. I mean,
yeah.
It's super exciting. He made some interesting creative and artistic choices. So we're going to talk about the history, why this is such a good compliment to Mount Rushmore, and maybe we can even get into why some of the statues are a little more popular than the others.
Well, I mean, I think we might know why, but I'm excited for the 45th statue because I think it will draw some attention.
Fair amount of vandalism, I would guess.
I would imagine so. Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine the satisfaction?
There'll be good people on both sides.
I mean, can you imagine the satisfaction of urinating on the Donald Trump statue?
He apparently likes that. So
talk about a PPT.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Ryan, before we get to that interview, we have a little bit of a recalculating today. So we gotta let's hear the recalculating.
Recalculating.
All right, Ryan. What you know what recalculating is, right?
Right. It is typically when you have made a mistake in a previous episode, and I find out, and I insist that we correct the record.
No. All right, that's overstepping it. Recalculating is where we revisit something we've talked about on the episode. Now, sometimes that is a mistake, mostly yours, sometimes mine, and but in this case, we are actually just following up to something that we dove into on the caves episode. You may remember that I was talking about a great word that I learned called bathyphobia, which is people being afraid of giant depths of basically looking down into a huge canyon, a cave, and that strikes fear in their heart. And you said you felt this way. Right.
I have felt this way. I remember very vividly being in Moscow and going down the escalator in a subway station and literally feeling like I was just being thrown down into the station. Like I had to hang on. I had to force myself because gravity wasn't enough to stay stuck to the actual stairs. So,
and I thought you were just being kind of dramatic, histrionic, but as it turns out, this is a real thing.
Yeah. So as it turns out, Russia is known for this. In fact, they just opened a new station that has the world's longest escalator at the Victory Park station, and the escalator is 130 meters or 426 feet.
And this is to the Moscow Metro.
Yeah, this is in the Moscow Metro, in the Victory Park station. So it goes all the way down 90 meters. So think about it. It's going down 90 meters, right? Mm-hmm. And it's 130 meters long. So just think about.
Yeah, that's pretty deep.
That's steep.
I mean, you're right. Yeah, the gradation is severe.
I don't think they know what escalators are supposed to do there. Like they're not supposed to just be ways you throw people off of things.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well just put a bungee cord. Yeah. Do you think that there was any part of this that has to do with protection in the case of nuclear bombs? Are these Cold War era?
I don't know, because look, Michael Bloomberg is famous for saying there are two kinds of people in this world: people who walk up an escalator and people who stand. Well, they go, you know what? If he was on this escalator, he would be petrified. He'd be holding to the rail. He'd be praying to get to the top. So.
It's surprising that he'd be one of the walkers with those little legs. I mean, it's like twice the energy to get up.
He has many times the energy that we do, Kiernan.
Well, of course, he's so rich. He's probably just lifted by people and carried up like a baby.
But he started to walk up escalators, right? It wasn't always that way.
He snaps his fingers to get his servants to walk him up the escalator.
Yeah. And look, Mike's a friend of the pod, so,
Since when?
I think always.
I actually think because of the potential protection from radioactivity, this could also be a recalculating for your last stop about Chernobyl.
That's true. That's true. If you really want to get away from Chernobyl, you have to go all the way down to the pits of the Moscow subway.
It's a cheap way to get your own zombie protective, radioactive protective bunker.
Oh god, a zombie movie set in Moscow would be pretty cool.
What? The whole hour and a half would just be people riding the escalator down. I don't know. It's so long.
Oof, that would be frightening.
All right, Ryan. Well, listeners, if you're at Victory Park Station in Moscow, hold on and bring a book because it's going to take a while. But let's get to my interview with James Van Nuys all about the city of presidents in Rapid City, South Dakota.
I think it's time to take off.
Tell the cabin crew.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
My guest today is James Van Nuys, a South Dakota-based sculptor who recently unveiled his stunning statue of Barack Obama, which will join 43 other presidents in downtown Rapid City, South Dakota, as part of the attraction known as the City of Presidents. And for those who don't know Rapid City, it's more or less the gateway to Mount Rushmore, the Black Hills, Badlands National Park, and a lot more great South Dakota hotspots that I love and I talk about on the pod a lot. So I'm interested and excited to dig in. James, thank you so much for coming on Out of Office.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Before we jump into your sculpture of Barack Obama, I'm wondering if you could give us a bit of background on the City of Presidents project at large, the history of it, where it came from, how it ended up in Rapid City.
Of course, Mount Rushmore is 15, 20 miles from here in Keystone, South Dakota. That was sculpted by Gutzon Borglum, and he had done a pretty large bronze piece. I think it's a little bit larger than life size, of Abraham Lincoln seated on a bench. And the city of Rapid City had borrowed that statue and put it on a corner downtown. And people liked it, because you could sit on the bench and kind of sit there next to Lincoln and take photos, and tourists liked it. A local businessman named Don Perdue, who has a furniture factory here in town, was impressed by that statue, and he came up with the idea that it would be cool to put a statue of a president on every corner of downtown Rapid City. He brought on a friend of mine named Dallery Davis, who was familiar and knew a lot of the sculptors in town, and they hired 4 sculptors. I was not one of them at the time. They set up a program where they were going to do 4 presidents a year, and they would start at both ends of the chronological spectrum. So they would do 2 of the first presidents and 2 of the most recent, and they would work back to the middle. So the first 2 were Washington and Adams, and then I forget who the most recent presidents were at that time, but that was the logic behind the order in which they were put up, and they were going to do 4 a year.
Mm-hmm.
So each sculptor was going to do 1 a year. Must have been after about 4 or 5 years, one of them dropped out, and then they hired me to replace that one. So that year they contacted me and asked me if I wanted to do a sculpture of Millard Fillmore. And I thought, well, doing a sculpture of Millard Fillmore wasn't one of my ambitions in life.
Right.
But that was when they brought me in. I did Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, and Andrew Johnson, all of whom I believe are in the bottom 5 presidents rated by historians.
Yeah, they are not the ones that hit it out of the park. You must have been very relieved to get the commission for Barack Obama.
Well, that was kind of stressful, but it was nice that I was able to learn on these rather obscure presidents. And
it's funny. I remember when I visited South Dakota, Millard Fillmore stood out for me because you put him in a chair, kind of very relaxed, with legs crossed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I'm a presidential nut, so I could have spent all day there just posing next to these statues. My wife gave me time for maybe 15. I'm wondering, too, it occurred to me in looking through your oeuvre, you had Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, Andrew Johnson.
Right.
And those 3 are quite renowned for for their involvement in quite racist policies.
Well, the thing about being a president of the United States in the 1850s probably didn't matter too much what your personal feelings were. You were fighting against kind of the inevitable.
Fillmore and Pierce both sort of saw through legislation that was struggling with the expansion of the United States and should slavery be allowed in the new
Right.
areas. And then Johnson, of course, having to pick up from being VP to Lincoln, was kind of thrust into this Reconstruction nightmare.
As I was researching Johnson, I really couldn't find anything very positive about him that stood out. Most of the noteworthy facts about him were negative.
Yeah.
And the only thing I could think of to do with that piece was he was essentially given the country in two pieces. So I put two pieces of the United States map in his hand, which I don't know whether that symbolism comes through for anybody or not, but
yeah, I would have considered, maybe he's just heard that the Senate's not going to carry forth his impeachment and remove him from office. Maybe a big smile on his face.
Now that would have been a good idea. Interestingly, that you should mention a smile with Andrew Johnson, because the pictures of him, he has such a grim-looking face, which I certainly used in the statue. Big frown is pretty much what you see in photos of Andrew Johnson.
Yeah, and it's interesting, you've talked about how you dive into the biography of the president, images of the president. Why don't you tell us about that sort of research gathering, and how do you strike the balance of a likeness but also try to bring forth the symbolism, like what you did with the two states, or the two halves of the
Right.
United States?
Well, what we do, the City of Presidents has a board of directors, so we have to come up with a concept and get it passed by the board of directors. And the first thing you do is you find every photograph of the person that you can. And in the case of the presidents in the 1850s, there weren't that many. Now, once you get up to Obama, things are completely different.
Yeah. Yeah, finding an image of Obama isn't too hard.
There are millions, of course. Coming up with the concept for the Obama statue, and the thing that caught my eye, the photo that caught my eye, was a picture of him walking out onto the stage at his first inauguration, and he's holding Sasha's hand. Michelle and Malia are also there, but of course I couldn't do all four of the family. Would have been fun.
Right.
But
you're going to need more than just that street corner.
Yeah. So I thought it would be nice to have him in that pose holding Sasha's hand, and she's all smiling and happy, and he's waving. And it was just kind of a nice feel to it.
Yeah, for those who I showed it to, many picked up on the fact that I don't know if you know, but on the internet there was this amazing series of memes all about how great Barack Obama is with babies. That he loves babies, he makes faces, he's playful, and it picks up on that too. His relationship to children, that father of the country, father of this family. I think your statue captures all those different parts of him, parts that are key to who he is.
Now, one thing that I was thinking there were already two of the presidents had their sons with them, and there were no women on any of or girls on the corners anywhere downtown. So I thought it would be nice to have a daughter. I thought it would be nice if little girls who are walking around looking at these statues at least had one little girl to relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. I had not thought of that. It did the parallel to JFK struck me because JFK is also holding his son's hand, right?
Yes, and that parallel, of course, struck me too, and I had to think, is this too much like that piece? And as we did more and more of the presidents, it became more difficult to come up with ideas that didn't suggest one of the pieces that was already out there.
What I love about the statues in the City of Presidents is they're dynamic. They don't look like kind of staid, let's all revere these people. They look like human beings who live and breathe, and show the strain of the presidency or the joy of the presidency.
The sculptors who worked on it, I think, did a really good job. There are a few that are a little dull, but for the most part, the sculptors came up with interesting ideas, and both in terms of symbolism and in terms of the aesthetic design.
So I'm wondering, in sculpting Barack Obama, there's not much statuary of him that's in existence just yet.
I didn't know that. I assumed that there would be hundreds of them being made.
No, actually, it's interesting. I was it's so distinctive that it makes its way into guidebooks. And a few years ago, I was in Jakarta in Indonesia, and it turns out that they have a very unique statue there of Barack Obama as a little boy, represented at the age at which he would have been studying in Jakarta. And so at his elementary school, there is a Barack Obama statue, which, it looks like a boy you wouldn't recognize from those millions of photos.
Right.
And he's holding a butterfly, and it's a very hopeful image.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's very, very neat. So did you find his likeness difficult to capture, or did it come fairly easily? Talk us through the process of what it takes to actually create a full-size statue.
Capturing a likeness is extremely difficult, always, at least for me. There may be sculptors who don't struggle with it, but I'm not one of them. But yes, it was difficult to get a good likeness. I worked at it a long time. Actually, the likeness of Sasha was more difficult for me.
What is the actual physical process? What materials do you use?
We use modeling clay, which is an oil-based clay. Never hardens. It's like the clay that you played with in elementary school. Probably a little more quality, but same basic recipe. It's made of linseed oil and ground up clay, natural clay. You have to make what's called an armature, which is a skeletal type structure, which I made out of copper plumbing pipe. Some people use rebar, bend it into the shape, the basic limbs and spine and things. Modeling clay won't support itself without some kind of more solid structure inside. Modeling clay, it gets pretty heavy. You might have 300 pounds of clay on the thing.
And you say 300 pounds of clay, and that's for slim Barack Obama. I don't admire whoever had to do Taft.
Yeah, Taft was probably...
I remember thinking Taft was very generously done, because not only does he not look incredibly rotund, but he's active. He's got a baseball behind his back, because I think he was the first president to throw out the ceremonial pitch.
That's correct. And that was a fun way to deal with Taft.
Yeah, absolutely.
It would have been fun to have him stuck in the bathtub, but
I do think there, if Rapid City has some rival city, that would be a great way for them to. They could all the most embarrassing moments of presidential history. They could cast.
That would be fun.
It could double your income.
Yeah.
So, we've alluded to a bunch of the statues and kind of what activities they're engaged in. And so I'm wondering, do you have some favorite presidential statues there in the City of Presidents that you'd recommend we check out?
Yes, I do. I think one of the best is Nixon. Nixon was done by Ed Hlavka, who's from from Sturgis. He doesn't live in the state anymore. He's the one that quit the City of Presidents when I took over.
Okay.
Nixon, he's got him seated in the chair that he got from China. And he's got his hands kind of folded, or he's got the fingertips of his hands sort of steepled in front of him. And he kind of got this craftiness.
He looks a bit...
not quite evil, but calculating.
Calculating. Perfect.
Another one of my favorites is James Buchanan, which was sculpted by Jim Maher, who's from Spearfish. he's he's captured a certain Chaplin-esque quality about Buchanan, which comes through in the photos of him. He's got his hair sticking straight up. And the symbolism that Jim used involved having his hands behind his back because he was apparently a do-nothing president. He has a document behind his back, which I can't remember what that document is, but the whole feel of that piece captured Buchanan so perfectly from what I've seen in photos of him that I just thought it was a really great piece.
Yeah, I love that you've chosen a few that aren't the superstar presidents. Theodore Roosevelt, for example, who's my favorite president. He's just kind of in his Rough Rider outfit, and to be honest, it looks like many other statues that I've seen of Theodore Roosevelt. And the ones that you're pointing out, they make me want to go out and learn more about that president to pick up on the slight symbolism, like what you're saying, these very subtle cues. One that I'm wondering if you know anything about is the FDR statue. And the reason that this one has always been of interest to me is that actually, much like McKinley being the first to have a phone in the office, it captures FDR, shows FDR behind a presidential podium with the major networks' radio microphones in front of him, gesturing to the fact that he was the first president to use kind of massive broadcast and radio broadcast. But I know that there was a controversy when they were creating an FDR statue for a memorial in Washington, D.C., because there was this question of, should we show him in his wheelchair or should we show him standing tall?
Right.
And I think that what is captured in the one in Rapid City is that he doesn't have that kind of signature FDR smile. He looks strained. He looks serious. And when you look at him at podium standing there, he is bracing himself against the podium, and it was against these polio injuries.
Yep.
So it's interesting, those controversies that you have to think through when you're trying to capture these men, up to now men, as they wanted to be seen in their moment in history.
That came up during the sculpting of that piece, and that was before I was on the project. Ed Halavka again did that one, and he did want him to be essentially supporting himself on that podium. And you can see the leg braces showing through his pants. Don Perdue, who is the man who started this project, felt that Ed had made Roosevelt somewhat too robust looking. He thought that at that period of his presidency, he was deteriorating. So anyway, that was kind of interesting.
Any other particular favorites or statues that have a story behind them or a significance that we might not be able to decipher just by looking at them?
Well, the Jimmy Carter statue comes up in conversation a lot because the patina is different on it than the other ones.
Oh, interesting.
Patina is a chemically bonded sort of coloration of the bronze. Bronze, when it comes out of, when it's cast, it's kind of a dull tan color. The rich brown color that most people associate with bronze is actually applied by heating the piece up and spraying ferric nitrate on it. That's what turns it brown. And age will sometimes turn them green. They also will patina pieces green by spraying cupric nitrate on them, which is to say copper, instead of ferric nitrate, which is iron. Anyway, John Lopez, when he did Jimmy Carter, went with kind of an opaque, greenish, tannish color, which is different than any of the other presidents downtown. And a lot of people seem to have been offended by it, by that particular shade of tan.
Well, I thought you were going to say it was treated with a light layer of peanut butter every other week or something.
Well, there is a peanut on the base, actually.
Yes. Well, whoever has to do Trump, they'll have to figure out how to do a radiant orange
They will.
on theirs.
Yeah.
And, for those who don't understand or haven't been to South Dakota, are there any spots, I mentioned at the top a bunch of the attractions that folks come through Rapid City on their way to. Are there any, favorite local spots, restaurants, museums, anything that you would say, if you come, definitely check this out, doesn't make its way into the guidebooks?
One thing that does make its way into the guidebooks that a fair number of tourists don't see is the Badlands. And so
yes.
I would recommend not missing the Badlands. It's one of my favorite places on earth.
Agreed.
But as far as the in town that might not be in guidebooks, one thing that I'm aware of course, as a musician, is the fact that we have a very lively music community here, which surprisingly brilliant musicians, considering the population of South Dakota is less than 1 million.
Yeah. Thanks very much to James Van Nuys for taking the time. I love your sculpture. I can't wait to get back to Rapid City. And now it's time for the last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
That was so interesting, Kiernan. I would love to mold a president myself. Maybe less in this, maybe less in the sense of a statue, and more like groom one for the presidency.
Oh.
But
I consider that our relationship. This is you grooming me for the presidency.
Well, I'm working on it. It's going to a lot of work, folks. But I really because Barack Obama is so awesome with kids, and because like Obama with kids is such a meme.
Yeah,
I think it's so cool that he included Sasha in the sculpture.
Yeah, I wonder how she feels about it.
I'm sure she's fine.
She
probably doesn't even know about it. I mean,
yeah, it's true.
There's a lot of media representations of her. She's not like Google. I don't think she's got like a Google alert for Sasha Obama.
It would be great to do one the Trump statue right across the street, and you could have the one where Trump is yelling at the kid who's mowing the lawn.
Or better yet, you could have Trump, and then you could put Tiffany like 4 towns over.
Yeah, he famously does not like to be with Tiffany. But that'd be a great way to boost the tourism 4 towns over.
Whatever that town, it's like, oh, you got to see Tiffany. Where is it? Oh, it's far away.
Keep going.
The statue's never seen her.
We've got to get to the last stop. The last stop is this segment. It's the last segment of the show.
It is this segment.
It's your favorite segment. It's my favorite segment. It's popularly known as the People segment. And it's a moment that you and I each share one thing that we've done that week. Maybe we've eaten, we've seen something, we did a local tourism spot, maybe we cooked, maybe we dreamed, we had a dream about a faraway place. Anything could count here if it feeds the spirit of wanderlust within you, even during the workaday week. So Ryan, I have to ask, how did you feed your wanderlust this week? What is your last stop?
So folks remember terrific episode we did a few months ago with my friend and documentary filmmaker and friend of the pod, Chase Whiteside.
Vaguely remember.
Yeah. So Chase talked about filming his documentary America in Colima, Mexico, and he gave listeners some things to do if they found themselves in Colima. And we talked a bit about the documentary, and now all of our listeners have a chance to see it, because on October 7th, America is going to premiere on PBS. So folks can tune in and actually see the documentary that we were talking about, and see Colima and a bit of Puerto Vallarta as well. And it's a really beautiful documentary.
And what is the basic story of it?
It's about these 3 brothers who come together to care for their aging grandmother. And her name is America. And it's about sort of the stress and the love and the complexities of what it's like to be 3 young men who move back home to essentially care for their grandmother because their father can't do it.
Sounds pretty symbolic.
Yeah.
Pretty good fortune that her name was America.
I know, right?
I mean, if her name was like Lupita, it wouldn't really have the same resonance.
No, and one of the big things is, though, the other documentary called America is made by this sort of kooky conservative, and it's about like Obama's evil takeover of America.
That's the one I saw. I thought that was Chase. No, I thought that was Chase's.
No, so this one is americadocumentary.com. We will link in the show notes. Check it out on PBS, and after it airs on October 7th, it'll be available on the PBS app streaming.
Very cool. And congratulations to Chase.
Do you have a last stop this week, Kiernan?
Of course, I have a last stop. I come
I knew
prepared
it.
every
I
week.
knew you would.
So this one is a local tourism spot. Really, really interesting. I've driven by it many times. This is just about 2 miles from my house here, right outside Boston. And it's called the Royal House in Medford, Massachusetts. It's a historic home that you can visit.
The Royal House? What royals live there?
No, it's Royal with 2 L's. It's the last name of the family that built it. Yeah, Royall.
So they weren't royals. They were just like, maybe if we just call it the Royal House, people think it's...
No, but interestingly, they were great supporters of the royals during the Revolutionary War. This was a family of loyalists. And in the 1700s, the royal family was a rich family that basically went to Antigua and ran sugar plantations. So they were part of that, triangle trade, rum to molasses to slaves. And that's what makes this house so notable, is that it's the only surviving freestanding slave quarters in the North. And what I found so interesting was that I do feel like we don't often hear the history of slavery in the North. It's been coming out maybe over the past few years just through stories about universities that have, endowments that came from slaveholding families. But here at this house, this royal house in Medford, Massachusetts, you can really feel that history because they have these slave quarters where at least 60 slaves lived, and historians think many more than that.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the sort of in the border between the South and the North, and you do not see a lot of hear a lot of talk of slavery in the North, or see a lot of physical representations of it.
And so basically, Isaac Royal Sr., who ran that sugar plantation, he moved his family back to Massachusetts and built this really big, ostentatious house with a main road going right by. He really wanted the attention. And then the slave quarters was kind of put off to the side. And interestingly, in this grand house, they made sure that there weren't any windows on the side that were going to face the slave quarters. So it kind of showed you how they were trying to, shut their eyes to this kind of evil that they were doing.
I just listened to an interview with his historian on the depiction of slavery in cinema, and one of the things that they drew a big complaint about the film 12 Years a Slave, which takes place in the South, was how close the slave quarters was to the main house. And they were like, that would never have happened. You never could overhear things happening in the slave quarters because, like you said, they wanted to have that out of sight, out of mind as much as possible.
It's definitely built to be out of sight, out of mind. However, interestingly, it is only like maybe about 30 feet away from the main house. And that's because they put the kitchen for the main house in the slave quarters, because in the killer summers where it was hot, they wanted to basically make the slaves suffer the heat of the kitchen work and still deliver the food to the house hot.
Yeah, that's pretty dark.
Yeah, it's visceral and it's very upsetting. And the house has some interesting history. Like once the royal family fled during the Revolutionary War because they were loyalists to the crown, they went to Nova Scotia and then they moved to England. The colonist army actually moved in, and this was a local headquarters. There's rumors that George Washington actually interrogated British soldiers in the bedroom at this house.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, but that's a bit apocryphal. The history that really kind of hits you in the gut is the story of one of these slaves that lived there, and her name is Belinda Sutton. And this is one of those kind of undersung stories that when I share it with you, you're just going to want to run to visit the Royal House in Medford, which is Belinda Sutton was a slave to the royal family from the age that she was about 12 into her 70s. And she was actually taken onto a slave ship from Africa, brought to the States, and became a slave. And she left behind this amazing historical document, which is a 1783 petition to the Massachusetts General Court. Basically, when Isaac Royal Jr., her master, died, he allowed her to choose whether she wished to be free or not. And as you might guess, she chose freedom. But that, of course, left her with no income, with nobody taking care of her. And so she filed with the court saying that she was owed a pension from the fortune of Isaac Royal Jr. And in this document, she actually recounts what she remembers of her journey to the United States, her many years of enslavement. And in fact, she actually won. She did get granted this pension, But very sadly, it seems that it was only paid one time because there are 5 different petitions that she put in over and over, which suggests that that pension never became a regular payout, and she probably struggled greatly. So she received one annual pension payment of £15 and 12 shillings. But we are all the richer to understand her inner life because of this legal document that survives. And you can read the full thing on the website and at the house itself.
That's a really incredible story. I've never heard that before.
Absolutely. So well worth the visit. And
what's her name again, so we can remember it?
Yeah, Belinda Sutton, Sutton.
Belinda Sutton. Well, that is one reason to visit the Royal House.
Absolutely. All right, Ryan. Well, what are we talking about next week?
Next week, I've decided that, way back in episode 18, we visited Mexico City. We are pushing episode 52 next week, and we're going to revisit Mexico City, talk about some fantastic restaurants and bars and museums and just some ways to walk around and enjoy the city.
Mexico City Part Dos. You love Mexico City.
Not as much as you love Peru.
That's true. You only have 2. I'm going to get 3.
Well, until then, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken.
Do you think that maybe they'll make the Donald Trump statue just have him eating like various types of fast food?
It'd be great if they just had him at a table and then visitors could leave different types of fast food.
And that's
so
pay homage to him, you just
high,
leave trash.
Yeah, rotting fast food.
That would be nice. That would be nice.
And symbolic of his soul.
Or maybe we should suggest it.